This is the Shotgun City Sheriff, the law himself, Clayton Clark.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Kennedy, a.k.a. Mr. Anderson.
This is the young Titan, Aaron Atlas.
Hey, this is Matt Brannigan.
This is the Warbound Hellhound Bo Sword.
This is your favorite drunken pro wrestler, a.k.a. the Bud Light Brawler, Dalton Davis.
This is Lizzie Six.
This is Jake Something.
And this is the jaw-jacking, back-cracking, God created all men equal, and then he made me the sequel, Rohit Raju, and you are listening to the Spot Show Podcast.
Spot Show Podcast.
The Spot Show Podcast.
Spot Show Podcast.
The Spot Show Podcast.
Spot Show Podcast, hell yeah.
The Spot Show Podcast.
The Spot Show Podcast? Yeah, that's right, I stuttered. Shut up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Spot Show Podcast, an independent wrestling podcast with a few pit stops along the way. We got something a little bit different, though, today.
Very different.
We got something very different. This is going to be a different intro than you're used to. Of course, I'm Dickie Wabash. That's Michael Madrox over there. This is going to be a very intimate one-on-one interview that I had with the legend Harker Dirge.
The GOAT brother.
Yes. And it was a very good conversation. I didn't really want to break into it how I normally do with our throwing to ad reads and all of that other stuff and our plugs, because the flow of conversation with him was just incredible. So we figured we would come on here at the very beginning, a few days after recording it, get our plug skis out of the way, get our dates out of the way, you know, all of that stuff, get our ad reads out of the way. And then we're going to just throw it into this conversation with Harker.
Because doing all that during this interview would have been a waste of his time.
Absolutely. And the fact that he even agreed to do the podcast in the first place was just baffling to me, because I even say it in the interview you're going to hear. I even say that he's kind of become a recluse from the world of wrestling. So for him to get back into it, I didn't really want to waste his time with talking about
as you shouldn't have,
talking about Patreon or where we're going to be next week or whatever, you know. So we're going to just we're going to be throwing it here to past Dickie here in just a minute. Madrox was not there for this most recent show. So yeah, we're going to just let everyone know that this episode is of course brought to you by Elite Pro Wrestling and Patreon.com/Mad Studios, but you're going to hear about them. You know, we've got a few upcoming dates for you guys. We are going to be AVW, All Vermilion Wrestling. We're going to be making our commentary debut there in Danville, Illinois. Knuckle up at the Saloon. You're going to be hearing our wonderful, wonderful voices on that show. That is, of course, Sunday, August 18th. And then Saturday, August 24th, we are going to be at EPW, Day of Reckoning. That is, of course, Odin, Indiana, where you can always, always find Elite Pro Wrestling. Something I also want to let you guys know as well, that, you know, we are the definition of independent. We're just two guys here with microphones in our hands. Some ways that you can support us. Best way to support us is patreon.com/Mad Studios. If you really like what we're doing here, go back us at the $5 tier. You're going to get this show and all of our other shows completely ad-free. MadBashStudios.com. You can find links to all of your favorite podcasting platforms where you can give us 5-star written reviews. Again, if you like what we're doing here, we would very, very much appreciate that. This episode is brought to you by patreon.com/Mad Studios. Hey, you there, listening to this, here's what you need to do. You need to go to patreon.com/Mad Studios. Not only is it the best way to support Mad Bash Studios, but it is home of dozens and dozens of hours of exclusive content. Not only are you going to get early access to Mad Bash Studios podcasts, Spot Show, and Enough of This, but you are going to get exclusive behind-the-scenes photos, videos, exclusive shows, such as Paid Show, such as Untitled Wrestling Commentary Show, and, of course, Past Bash. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can head on over to patreon.com/Mad Bash Studios, where every piece of content is unapologetically creative. This episode is brought to you by Elite Pro Wrestling. We all love live entertainment, right? We all love live wrestling, right? Well, what if I told you that there is a place that combines the entertainment and the wrestling live that we all love? Look no further than Elite Pro Wrestling. Whether it's in person in Odin, Indiana, or Washington, Indiana, or if you check them out on YouTube, Elite Pro Wrestling guarantees a quality show that allows them to live up to the name Elite. If you're feeling generous, go ahead and check them out on Patreon as well. If you back them, you're going to get early access to all of their shows before they hit YouTube. Again, check out EliteProfessionalWrestling.com. This was, I even say it in the interview, this was my white whale. This is one that, we've alluded to Harker so many times on the podcast, and to finally sit down and talk with him was... I was four words. I didn't really have the way to really put it. It was one of those where after we get in the car to leave, I looked at Jason V and I went, I can finally let the sigh of relief out. So yeah. So hey, enough blabbing, Madrox. Let's go ahead and let's get into my one-on-one interview with Harker Dirge. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Spot Show Podcast, an independent wrestling podcast with a few pit stops along the way. And boy, are we taking a pretty big pit stop here today. We're going to have a kind of a different format than we normally do. This is just going to be a little one-on-one interview. And I got to tell you, when I first started this podcast with Michael Madrox, who cannot be here, this is essentially my white whale podcast. This is one that I did not think in a million years would ever be happening. This man deserves every single introduction, but he doesn't necessarily need the introductions. You have heard him mentioned countless times on this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Harker Dirge has made his way onto the Spot Show Podcast. Harker, my God, thank you so much for being here. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for the who.
When you started out, did you say we're on WhatsApp or did you say what's up?
What's up?
And a pit stop or what kind of stop? Like the one you make at the rest stop?
Yeah,
they closed. We're in Illinois now. They've closed most of those.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than when you're driving down the road and you're like, "Hey, there's a rest stop." Nope, it's closed.
It's outhouses now.
I know, pretty much. There's one just outside of my hometown that they're like renovating, and it's been closed for like a year. And it's just like, when are we gonna actually get this thing open? So,
what does a renovated porta-john look like?
Pretty good, I guess.
2 rolls of toilet paper.
3
and a clean seat.
3 rolls of toilet paper.
It's got a clean seat. Means it's no good. Nobody else has used it.
Oh, wow. That's actually logic.
It's got no reviews.
That's logic that I've never taken into consideration here.
On a seat is a good review.
Only Harker Dirge. Only Harker. Harker, again, man, thank you. This is incredible. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on here. I know that you've kind of become a... excuse my use of the word, kind of a recluse from the world of wrestling in the last few years. So why me? I guess is kind of the question here.
What about you?
I mean, like what's got you prompted wanting to finally get back into it? Just kind of dip your toes a little bit into it.
I'm bored.
You're bored. That's kind of why I started the podcast.
When I think of boredom, I think, what's your name here, Dickie?
Yeah, I go by Dickie on here. Yeah,
Dickman. I think when I'm bored, I think of Dickman.
Dickman.
Who said that? Remember where that came from?
Yeah, that was Dexter Schwartz called me Dickman.
Do the people know who Dexter Schwartz is?
We've mentioned him a couple of times on here. Yeah, whenever we had V on, we told some Dexter.
He put his tongue down your throat.
More times than I want to admit. I have also seen that man naked more than I've seen myself naked, probably.
Have you ever seen his pictures of Greg Valentine?
So I told that story.
You did, good.
It's my favorite rib of all time.
Excellent. So if all 20 people listening, this ain't inside baseball. They know about the Greg Valentine pictures and Dickman and Dexter and all the rest
of it. Do you remember the white T-shirt rib that he had?
Unfortunately not.
We'll get into that one later. It's a little bit early to be talking about.
I'll remind you about it. Talk about me. I want to talk about me.
Well, that's why I'm here. Because there's a lot to talk about because, like, in a way, and by the way, I just want to, if the acoustics of the room sound weird for the people listening, sincerest apology. I'm here in Dirge's dungeon right now, so we had to make the little bit of a travel, so we're kind of working with what we got here, but no, anyway, like, when we had first started the podcast, I had a little list, and I was like, man, if I could sit down and just pick the brain of Harker Dirge for any amount of time, I mean,
15-minute podcast.
Probably. Well, I was hoping for 20.
Let's pick something better than my brain.
Well, I mean, hey, the ball's in your court. What would you like to pick? Can we just go pick some strawberries or something?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Las phrases.
Yeah, so you're speaking Spanish now, which is weird to me.
A little bit.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing for the last year, is just trying to learn Spanish. Right now I can communicate about as well as a 2-year-old can. If I need food, I can tell you, but I understand what people are saying all right, about 65%, but I'm only doing it with YouTube videos. I understand some people go to college for that sort of thing and learn it and don't learn it or whatever.
Yeah, that was a shot at me because we had this conversation as we were walking up. I said that I went to college and learned Spanish, but I know what you're doing here. But
No tengo palabras.
I don't know what the translation is on that one, but no, I mean, here's the thing that I think that this is a pretty good little starting point here is that, the word legacy, I think, is something that a lot of people, some people enjoy a legacy. Some people particularly don't want a legacy, but like whether they want it or not, there is in fact a legacy. And like, how do you feel about like a legacy that you've set? I mean, like I said, I'm calling you my white whale. Like you're my big goal. Is that something that you like, it kind of repulses you a little bit, or is it like, does it make you uncomfortable, or is it like, yeah, I do.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I know there's like, so,
I don't even think about it. I mean, most days I don't even think about it. So if you're talking about, I'm flattered and I appreciate it, but I don't hold myself in any high regard.
Yeah. And I think that people that do hold themselves in too high of a regard, like there's a little bit of an issue there, but yeah. But like, I mean, like your influence is definitely felt like still to this day. Like we recently just had, Jimmy Carrot on the podcast, and he sung your praises, how he studied under the tree of Dirge. And, we've had Jason V on a couple of times, Cecil Cerveza. These are all guys that like.
They're good ones in Cecil.
And and good ones in Cecil. Hey, according to him, he's the Sean of Cookies and Cream.
The what?
The Sean Mooney.
The Sean Mooney.
No, the Sean and Marty comparison.
Oh.
Yeah. He claims that he's the Sean, but ball's in his court. I was also on that one, but no, I mean, like just even little things. Like here's a little funny story that I would be remiss if I didn't tell you this. So, there was a bell ringer that used to run the old Georgetown shows back in the day. He has now become independent wrestler Dalton Davis.
Doesn't ring a bell.
And I knew you were going to say that. And he, one of my closest friends, whatever. He is very much influenced by you. Like he, there was that, that trademark Harker toe tap that you would do when you were in the corner. Tell
him not to do that.
He learned that the hard way.
I broke the toe off 3 boots doing it.
Yes, that's my point that I was getting ready to make here. Is that he messed up the tip of his boots that he spent very good money on by doing it, and he called it like, he's like, this is the curse of Dirge or whatever. He's like, that's what I get for trying to be the goat, I guess. Yeah. But it's just it's little things like that.
Bad. Wait, is that a sheep or a goat? What does the goat say?
Oh, what does a goat say? That's actually, remember those screaming goat videos?
I tell you what, a goat in a
that might get cut. But anyway, yeah, like I think that that's something that like is kind of forgotten, or not really forgotten, but kind of overlooked, is like the whole idea of a legacy. And like, there are still people out there that like want to honor the legacy of Dirge. And like, for you to say that you're flattered by that, I mean, me personally, like I would feel uncomfortable in a situation like that, because it's like, oh, of course I have a hard time taking a compliment. So
no, I do too. I know where you're coming from, but I'm complimented. I'm flattered. I'll take it. But at the same time, it's not even anything I ever think about.
Mm-hmm.
I just was a person doing a thing, I was blessed to have a lot of good opportunities, and I started the right way, and I had a lot of good people behind me. I worked with a lot of legends from the start and all the way through, and I was just taking what I learned from them and doing it myself. And if people take something from me, then that's carrying on a tradition, then, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue into my first bit of conversation here. You talk about starting. You were trained by the late, great exotic Adrian Street. And, you started training in what, 2000? I believe you told me there's like 2000 around
1995.
1995 is when you started training? Wow, I did not know that.
We lost Adrian a year ago.
Yeah.
Almost to the day, it was July 31.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that was did you feel that the documentary that they made for him on Peacock really like embodied him as a person, or do you think that they could have done better?
No, they did as well as they could have with the amount of time that they had. But if you wanted, Adrian wrote 7 books about himself. Adrian wouldn't be one documentary. He'd be a miniseries.
Uh-huh.
That man led an amazing life. He was 40 or 41 by the time he came to North America. He had already had a complete career.
He had already pretty much peaked, yeah.
Then had another 15-year career here in the States where he did everything, wrestled with everybody, and took every title.
And do you think that that's someone that history kind of forgets, or do you think that,
They had for a long time until the British wrestling started to take off again, and people were talking about World of Sports and the influences there.
Yeah.
But as far as a trailblazer, even in the States, nobody was doing gimmicks like that before he came over here.
Yeah.
Not like that.
Yeah. And he definitely, I will be the first to admit, I didn't know who he was. And then when like you said, when the UK wrestling started, that's when you learn about him.
So you're right. He was forgotten unjustly by a lot of the people here, but a lot of the people that got into wrestling over the last 20 years followed the WWE Attitude Era, where it was just pop culture. There was no focus on history. There was no appreciation for what came before you. Mm-hmm. They didn't care. They wanted it for themselves, and it was a selfish endeavor. That whole era was. And a lot of people coming from that now came because they were interested in that,
Yeah.
To them, Stone Cold Steve Austin is Bruno Sammartino to me.
Which is crazy to think about. Like, it's just the different generations of growing up with it. So were you aware of Adrian before you went to his school? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I was a super wrestling fan. Back in the day, I would get all we used to get magazines. There were these little things. They were pieces of paper stuck together. You could go spend money on, called magazines.
Yeah, they don't really.
People that aren't old enough to remember that. And I used to buy all of those. The VHS tapes, man. We didn't have internet, YouTube, and all that. You'd get a VHS, and you could see these people. And I remember seeing Adrian. The first time I ever saw him with my eyes moving in a video was an old Bill Apter VHS, Bill Apter, Gordon Soley, called Lord of the Rings. And Adrian was in a segment in that. I thought, that's the weirdest man I've ever seen in my life. He creeped me out. I'm a 10-year-old kid. He creeped me out. Then you'd see him in a magazine. You thought, this guy's bizarre. And it turns out a little bit of that was real and a little bit of that was a gimmick. He was a unique individual.
That's pretty much my next question. Was he one of the old, you always think about the old brother that's like trying to protect the gimmick or whatever, or was he like very straightforward with you of how he was as a normal person? Like, I guess the question is like, where did the real Adrian begin and where did the character begin?
I don't know.
You could, even as well as you knew him, you never knew.
No, I'm just joking.
Okay.
He was a kind man, a very serious man, very hard man, what they call in Britain, very tough, very hard. But he was flamboyant too in his own way, not like, excuse the term, fruity. He never acted that way. He and his wife were inseparable. They were attached to the hip, but he had those mannerisms that you saw. He kind of carried that with him because I think he was just used to always having a spotlight on him. But man, the dude could talk about himself all day long. In a lot of ways, I think he was a bad role model to have as a young, impressionable kid getting into wrestling, because Adrian was so sure of himself, so full of himself that it kind of rubbed off on you. So you thought that's how a wrestler carried himself. And then you understand that if you're acting like Adrian, you're starting to grate people the wrong way. And when I mean acting like him, I mean talking about yourself and being very self-confident. And when you're young, you better humble yourself a little bit.
I've been there, done that. Yeah.
Or somebody will humble you. I never had anybody humble me, but a lot may have tried.
Because and that obviously came from his teachings, I'm sure, of where it's like where to keep yourself humble, where to like really believe in yourself.
How to protect yourself in the ring, because the first thing we learned was wrestling.
Yeah, so that was essentially my next question.
Start with bumps and running ropes and bumps and running rope. When guys learn that first, that's the only thing they know how to do. And you touch them and they bump. We learned how to wrestle before we took our first bump.
So he'd get you in there and like have you chain wrestling with day one.
Yeah. Even a little bit more than that, even how to protect ourselves in case somebody, he came up in the old school, the original wrestling in Great Britain. When it really started to take off, it was almost a semi-shoot because there was so few opportunities, but there was money to be had and TV was new. So everybody wanted to be on TV. So if you let your guard down for a minute, somebody would take advantage of you. Mm-hmm. So he taught us all that stuff. I mean, I was prepared for fights when I got in the ring for the first time, and nobody ever tested anybody in this era.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hear the stories about like William Regal, growing up a bare knuckle fighter, and then going into wrestling. And I've always really enjoyed the European style. Like, it is a lot of grappling. And then like, it kind of got reinvented with the whole British strong style mentality of, going out there and, hard strikes and, a lot of grappling and whatnot. So from learning that, like you said, day one, you're just in there, you're grappling, you're doing all this, you're wrestling because you're going to wrestling school. Because obviously he's such a good character. When, did he teach you character work? Did he teach you
train all that?
Okay.
You'd go in there. We could train all day. We lived there. We didn't go once a week or anything like this. It wasn't a wrestling club like they have now. People came from all over the world. This was in Gulf Breeze, Florida. It was an island 3 miles off the coast of Pensacola. You had to drive down a 3-mile bridge to get there. So we were on the island. We lived there. People came from all over the world to go there. Mm-hmm. And you would live there as long as you had to, in order to get what he called a diploma, you had to pass 30 lessons. So that's basically 30 days because we were wrestling every day. But I was there for 6 months. Wow. And you could wrestle as long as you want. And he'd stay.
So
he'd come in the morning and he'd stay.
Is it 6 months and then you're working shows, or you're working shows during that 6 months?
I had some shows during
that. Yeah. That's crazy that it was literally like you had to commit yourself to the lifestyle of it in a way. Like you were
it wasn't this stuff that they have now where everybody has a wrestling so-called school on the corner and you can go once a week and pay $20 and get in, and somebody that's never done anything will show you how to bump around. You had to want it. You had to pay cash up front, $1,995, $1,500 cash up front.
Wow.
Just to start. And that was your one-time fee. And then $1,995, $1,500 in 2024, that's like what, $3,032?
Yeah, damn near. That's crazy though. So like you were, because you've told me this before, you were 18 when you went down there, or were you 19?
19.
You were 19. Okay. Because that's the thing that I find crazy. I always have this little joke that I like to throw out, is that a lot of these workers these days, by the time they've turned 18, they've already got 15 years of experience, because so many of them are starting so young. So so starting at 19, like you knew, like this is it, like this is what I am wanting to do with my life. Like there's no other, like did you have a backup plan, or did you just like?
I should have, but I didn't. But I wanted. The reason I waited, I was 19. I was probably 19, almost 20, because of the way the time hit. But the reason I waited then, I would have gone at 18, except for the fact that I needed to work real jobs and put a bank account behind me so that I had a pad. So when I went down there, I had plenty of cash. I'm spending $1,500, $300 some odd a month, rent, food, etc. I had to have all my ducks in a row.
That's insane. Like to just think about, because like you said,
and not only that, I wasn't going to go down there until I was 230 pounds.
Oh, so you wanted to put a little bit of bulk on here.
I had to have my body weight where I wanted it to be. my body prepared. I had gym memberships and a whole nine, and then get money to buy gear once I got there.
Yeah.
I know if I had a match, I didn't want to go out in the ring in tennis shoes and sweatpants. You had to have gear. You had to look like a wrestler.
Mm-hmm. And like you were alluding to it, like there was no internet, there was no highspots.com, there was no Title boxing boots where you can just go, or I'm wearing a pair of Jordan 1s right now. Like a lot of people are just wrestling in their sneakers or whatever. Don't
do that, guys.
You had to get the real deal. Like you had to make your connections. Now, Adrian obviously made gear. I know this. So like I'm assuming he made you your first pair of gear. Like you got your first pair of gear from him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And like, was that included with the tuition, or was that more of a? I didn't think so.
That's an add-on.
Yeah.
Stuff takes time and money and effort.
Yeah.
Adrian and Linda sewed the gear up. Adrian would cut the designs out. Linda would sew it. And then they also had boots. They had boots in stock from Stagecoach Wrestling Boots. He would make several sizes and colors and things, and then they'd buy them for a little bit of money, and he'd sell them for a little bit more. So it was right away I had an all-in-one resource.
Now, are you being taught all of this as well? Like, is he teaching you the ins and outs of like, I know this word has a negative connotation to it, but it really shouldn't. But like,
you better be careful before you say it, because I'll jump across this table, son.
Hey, I have all the respect in the world for Adrian, but it's that the carny side of it, of where you like are learning how to make your money while also working. Now, like I said, I know that word nowadays can have a very negative connotation to it, but it doesn't always have to. So like
carny
is what's that?
What's wrong with carny?
I mean,
that's where the roots came from. People,
yeah, exactly.
People who call people carny are people who don't have the initiative to go out and do things for themselves.
Yeah,
they say, well, the reason he got things that he got was because he hustled. It was a carny. You're supposed to hustle.
Yeah, I think some people forget that too.
It's called being smart.
Yeah. So my point was he teaching you this hustle, or was that something that you kind of had to learn on your own?
No. You picked that up along the way, working with professionals.
Yeah. Like, you're in the car ride for, 5, 6, 7 hours. And
potentially, but for me, it seemed like the locker room was where people let their guard down and talk, because back then what happened in the locker room stayed in the locker room. You didn't have to worry about somebody bringing it out in public. There's no shoot interviews, no internet or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you could really let your guard down and speak truth.
Yeah. You see, and I think that's changed a little bit. It's pivoted where it's like more of the car ride. To me, it feels like these days.
It probably always was, but I don't remember traveling with a lot. I've almost always been exclusive to myself traveling.
Yeah, I don't ever think I do. In the little time
Very
that I've known you,
did I ever get in a car with other people.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the thing too that people got to understand is like my relationship with you like is just a blip on the radar of what your actual whole career is. And like you even said before we started recording, you were like, "There's history that you don't even really know about." Probably
like
20
years worth.
Yeah, and I mean, we're gonna try to get to as much of that 20 years as we can.
If I don't get bored first.
Well, I hope that I'm
talking
keeping
about
you
me.
just talking about you. No, like that's the thing that. And
when are we going to start burying people?
Whenever you want, Harker. Like I said at the top of this, the ball is in your court. This can kind of be tied into, to quote unquote burying people if you want to do that. You've alluded to it a lot during this already, like the big differences between back then when you started training in 95 to nowadays. And like you said, 20 years, you've seen all that develop in real time. Is it one of those that like you're seeing it slowly happening, or is it one of those you blink and then all of a sudden you've noticed there's a big change? Or both, even.
No, that's a good observation, because I was just saying that earlier. I was talking to my wife earlier today about the size of the crowds that we used to have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you would expect to on a small one would be 300. That'd be a small crowd, and then there were certain shows I would expect to go in and find 1,000 people there.
Wow,
that sounds like big fish stories to guys now
that
are independents. They walk in like that scene from Mean Girls where the mathletes come in and there's 7 people sitting there, and he's like, "Good crowd this time, good crowd." They see 60, 75 people, they think that's a great crowd, and it's fine. It's a good crowd for them, and I'm happy for them. I'm happy they're happy with it. But I was telling my wife earlier today, it seems like I blinked. One time I blinked, and all of a sudden there's small crowds, and there's small wrestlers, no offense, and nobody can help how they were born with their height and everything, but you can always be an athlete.
So, this is a question that could really go multiple directions here. Why do you think that is? Like, what do you think caused the change? I mean, is there a single answer?
The internet, easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
It went from where if you really wanted it, you had to save your money up, be a certain way. There was only a few schools that were known. The way I found Adrian's school was through an advertisement in the magazines. I mean, back then there was Adrian, there was Al Snow's Body Slammer School in Ohio. Windy City in Chicago had a school that was known because they had TV advertisements. And then you had the Monster Factory up in the Northeast. And I think there was one of the Samoans at the time had a school, Sika, I think it was, God rest his soul, had a school down in Florida. And that was like about it in 1995. And you had to know about it. You had to want it. You had to leave your home and go like you were going to college. This wasn't community college. This was, you had to go off to college, pack your bags and move, spend some money. Then you got the internet come around, and everybody has a wrestling school now, and everybody can advertise it on the internet. Everybody can find it. So you just had it supply. The supply went up and the demand went down all at once, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, we're talking about year 2000. I think there was still a little gas in the tank by about 2003 or 4, and then it really started to drop off. But then if you look at the wrestling landscape too, what happened in year 2000 nationally?
Are you talking about WCW
It's
closing?
only one game in town.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean...
Think about being a wrestler in that time.
Yeah.
You've been around for 5 years now. Take me from late 1995 all the way up to 2000, where now I've got a little bit of experience and some cachet, but now WCW and ECW have closed at the same time, so all of these really super talented wrestlers are looking for spots on the independents too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because not only is your opportunity of getting signed to WWF at the time, because there's going to be WCW, ECW guys coming in filling those spots. But like you just said, now the independents are going to be full of these guys trying to make ends meet. And, they can come in and they can be like, all right, brother, I was on TV and I can do this, blah, blah, blah. And, it's like all they see, it's almost like it's cyclical in a way, of where they just like they get their stars in their eyes of like, oh, hey, here's, this person was on TV, put him on a flyer. That's going to get more people into the building, where it's like, instead of doing more of the homegrown stuff. And you see it even today. At least I do.
Yeah. I probably sidetracked a little bit on that question too, as far as when you blink and it's changed.
Oh, no. I mean, you were still pretty much on track with it. Because it's like I said, it was a multifaceted question.
But you had that going, so there's where the jobs started to dry up for your top wrestlers. But then at the same time, you had the internet, where now people don't have to find catalogs and talk to people to know where to get wrestling boots and wrestling gear and wrestling school. It's all on the internet. It's all local, and it's all easily available.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not begrudging anybody that's done that now. If you enjoy it and you're having fun doing it, more power to you.
Yeah.
But I'm just telling you, it's different. And there was more of a professionalism aspect then than there is now, and I think it's a lot due to the internet. I think a lot of the downfall of society in general is due to the internet. I mean, we used to, if we wanted to read dirty words, we used to have to go in the restroom and read what somebody wrote about their girlfriend or the girl next door and which number to call for a good time. And now
it's on
social media,
Twitter. Now it's on Twitter or Facebook. But
I digress.
Yeah. And no, like, that's the other thing too, is like, people like the internet, for all it's good, there really is a lot of bad. And I mean, there's definitely its positives and its negatives. And like, to hear it spelled out that way, and like, it was almost like it was the perfect storm, like you said, because WCW closes, ECW closes, TNA is upstarting, but I mean, they were really just a blip on the radar at that point. You got WWF, and then now you got the mixture of now you can go on the internet and do all this other stuff. So I can see how that would absolutely be a blink and you miss it. Like, oh my God, like, where did all this just come from,
Yeah. It felt like things were going good, and then things were not so good.
Yeah. So let's, now we're at a crossroads here. Do you want to talk about the good or do you want to talk about the not so good? Because I feel like we could really go.
I don't want to complain
either direction. I don't want this to be
two different businesses is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I got into professional wrestling, and then by about 8 years or 9 years in, it wasn't so professional anymore. Yeah. And I don't think it ever recovered to a large degree. And I don't begrudge anybody's doing it now from enjoying it.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. So
I don't think a lot of them even know what went into getting a booking back then.
Yeah, because
you just contact somebody on social media and they go, oh, okay, come on.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's easy come, easy go. I heard somebody say, well, so-and-so, it's hard to get wrestlers. How can you, what do you say? How can you make a program now, a printed program and something professional like that, or a nice poster advertising who's going to be there when guys no show or call in day of? And I said, easy come, easy go. That's why.
I've been back in the business since the first part of 2023. And in January 23 is when I came back. And I don't think that I have been on a show where there has not been at least one cancellation. And that's what makes the branding hard.
It used to be rare.
Yeah. And,
here's a name drop. Here's your first name drop. Let's drop names.
Let's drop some names because, boy, does Harker Dirge have some names.
The first cancellation I ever filled in for, I was in Hopkinsville, Kentucky at an armory. It was a show being run by Mo and Mabel, Men on a Mission, if anybody remembers them. And they had a partner that looked like the Junkyard Dog, but he wasn't. His name was Deputy Dog. They were running a show, and they had me in to wrestle on the undercard as a heel. And then I had a mask gimmick, too. I was smart enough to always have two gimmicks. That way, if somebody no-showed, I could work twice and get more experience. And we're talking 1996 late now. And I told him ahead of time, I said to Mo, I said, I've got a mask gimmick. If somebody no-shows, what do you know? He comes in and he says, Bill Dundee has to work at the strip club tonight. He can't make it. Can you put that mask on? And that's the first time I ever heard of a no-show.
You just said the most professional wrestling sentence I've ever heard in my entire life. Bill Dundee has to work at the strip club.
Put it in a promo.
Yeah. The reason I'm on this show is because Bill Dundee's at the strip club tonight.
Let me say it again with all the names. Mo from Men on a Mission came up to me. And he said, brother, can you put that mask on tonight? Bill Dundee can't make it. He has to work at the strip club. Now, in Bill's defense, he was managing the strip club.
Oh, that's different.
It's not like he was working the door.
Yeah, that's different. So because the way that you're just casually naming these people, like it really makes me think of like a name, as people call, like on these indies back then, seemed like a lot more commonplace mostly because of WCW.
Even before that, though, I'm talking about in the 90s, because we were professionals. They were all professionals working with professionals. There was no territories left. They still wanted to have places to work.
Yeah.
But for me, now it's like a treat, Val Venus is on the show tonight, guys. It's going to be like our WrestleMania. For me, it was like, I was blessed to be in a locker room with those type of guys, but I wasn't starstruck or blown away. I mean, maybe first of all, because I was trained by an actual legend. But you would just walk in a locker room and see these guys that are now considered Hall of Famers. It's like I had a old program from Powerhouse Wrestling that ran out of Streeter, Illinois, and just a program they used to sell at all the shows. And these are guys that were routinely on the card on here. I've got it in front of me right now. Honky Tonk Man, Cowboy Bob Orton, Jimmy Valiant.
And these are just commonplace.
And these are guys that were on every show.
That's crazy. That's so weird to think about because like it definitely it's like, oh, this name who just got released from WWE 3 months ago or whatever, this is our WrestleMania now. Or it's like, oh, this Attitude Era star is on our show. This is our WrestleMania. But then it's like back then it was just commonplace. It's like,
because it was still just the last vestiges, what do you call it? Is that the right word of it?
I would say so, yeah.
Of the territories, it was just what was left of it. These guys, all they knew was wrestling, so they were going to be where there was a show and money. Everybody was making money.
Which that's almost a very weird time because to come into the business because
it's like I had my foot in two worlds.
Yeah, because the territories are on their way out So you're kind of stuck in two worlds.
Yeah.
You know, was Adrian like very one of these guys, because there was almost, and I already feel like I know the answer to this question. There was like almost like a forced loyalty. I've talked about it with Jason V on here a few times. Like, was Adrian he used to work back in the day. Yeah.
I know what that stands for.
Yeah.
Vendetta.
Yeah. But was he encouraging you to get out there and make your money, or was he, which I'm sure he was, or was there still like protect yourself and, be careful and
For the money?
Yeah. Like,
it's a business. He told first and foremost, it's a business. And if you're not making money after a while, get out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't do it. So I never lost money. Well, no, not say never, but I rarely ever lost money, because he also taught us about the merchandise table. And that was my thing.
And I think the merchandise table is kind of a lost art form.
Oh, I'm not gonna smarten anybody up about that.
Oh no,
if they're not industrious enough to do it themselves, I can't tell you how to do it.
Hey, all I'm saying is that there are websites where you can get a decent amount of stickers for a decent amount of money, throw them on your merch table, make a profit. That's all I'm saying. And that's like, but like, it's almost as if like you're describing a completely different world. And it's just because now it's just more about, hey, we're going here. We're going to learn these bumps. We're going to learn all this, but they're not teaching you the
all they're learning is bumps. They're not, well, let me get started on that. All they're learning is bumps and ropes running. They're not learning why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no professionals teaching them that dirty word psychology. Presentation. Nobody was better than Adrian at presentation and knowing when to do things, why to do it, and how to get attention. And I've had guys, I don't want to bragging on myself. Don't anybody listen think I'm bragging on myself. I'm just saying that I was handed things down from a generation before that I appreciated, and that I was blessed enough to have the ability to adapt for myself. But I've had guys that were actually pretty well known on the independents modern days guys that I'm talking about in the last few years that I've been on shows with, and they'll watch my match and they'll say, man, I want to be as over as you. How do you do that? Psychology. I told one of them, I said, you've got to not be the guy that gets known for jumping off high stuff and get known for the guy that actually sells and connects with the crowd.
But that's almost, it's not that way anymore though. It's not that way anymore.
I'm talking about a guy.
But you're talking back.
I'm talking about a guy only a few years ago, just before I quit, who now I think he took my advice, and he's got a pretty decent cachet, pretty decent name recognition on the independents, and he's done well for himself. But why did nobody ever teach him that? He was already starting to get some traction then, but why did nobody ever tell him that before me?
Yeah, that's insane. And that like, that's such like, it feels like with people that have been around for however many years, there's like this divide of there's these, I'm trying to protect my spot, I don't want to give this guy advice, but then there's like you'll willingly give the advice, like that's what's crazy about it to me.
My dream was to be the worst wrestler on the card, because then I knew I was on a darn good card.
Yeah, which is it's a weird way to look at it. But I mean, it's like, so talking about being on the card here, you've alluded to these this material that you've brought here, and we're going to get some photos of some of this to put on the Patreon, because guys, you got to see this stuff. Like, you're looking at these flyers, and you are in the main event above some pretty well-known names. And, I think that that's something that definitely deserves to be acknowledged. Like, these guys were, I'm assuming, like probably first half main or semi-main, but then you're coming in and you're main eventing.
That's a lot of pressure. Think about that.
Yeah.
I'm a nervous person anyway. Think about sitting there all night and listening to this guy goes on, that guy goes on, listening to the crowd, knowing you have to go on last. That's where you learn sink or swim right there.
Yeah.
But I was putting some good opportunities, because I managed to work my way in with some promoters that were nice promoters that knew what they were doing, got good crowds, and made enough money to bring in decent name legends and recognized wrestlers. But they would always put me on last because I was over. I mean, I was over in that region.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys coming in had to be gone the next day. Maybe they weren't come back for a couple months or something like that. So they would take care of me that way. And the reason I got taken care of like that was because I knew how to get over from what I was trained and from what I learned from other veterans. But also I was reliable. I was always the first guy at the building, almost always. If some of the wrestlers had a game where they would try to beat me there, and they never did.
Well, that even still carried over into whenever I first came into the business. Like, we're talking 12, 15 years later, you were always at the show before me somehow.
I always tried to get there before everybody else. Well, you never know. You should leave way early anyway. You never know what traffic's going to be like.
Exactly.
Like that. But I always got there first so that the promoter, when he saw me, he was relieved. That's one guy he doesn't have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And I could talk with back when we had actual TV. A lot of these that you're talking about that are in the programs, these were on Fox TV and local Fox, but these were on TV. So you had to have somebody that could cut promos.
Yeah.
And that was another skill that I learned that there was a need for. And I managed that. So that's what put me in those positions.
Yeah, and you talk about the promo skills, or even just being on TV and stuff. Like, this is, we talk about the internet and all that. Like, this is long before.
Yeah, we're not talking about internet TV or YouTube. This is TV.
Yeah, like you're like,
Again,
this is TV
and the old world.
Yeah, and you're talking about very rudimentary editing and broadcasting, and so it's just you, a mic, and a lower third at the bottom that says Matt Maverick. And you're on there talking, and which, by the way, is so weird for me to say Matt Maverick, because there's still someone that works with the name Matt Maverick, and he's kind of...
There's multiple around the country, and that's one of the reasons that I did change my name. There were 3.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was the first one by far, and some of them ended up taking my name. One in Indiana, and maybe not even the one you're talking about. I think he was given his name by Dick the Bruiser Jr.
Yeah. The Matt Maverick I'm talking about, I'm still on shows with him to this day.
There was one in Indiana that I worked on Bruiser's shows as that, and then he didn't book me. And I was like, why is he not booking me anymore? Then I found out he gave somebody else my name.
Oh. Well, I'm going to put a pin in that, because I definitely want to come back to, your early beginnings of being Matt Maverick and all that. But back to this whole, TV, nowadays, a lot of people, let's look, for example, at the Wyatt Six, because they're the big thing that's on TV right now. But a lot of their stuff is heavily edited. Back then, like I said, it's just you with a stick man next to you, and you have a lower third and then a very rudimentary graphic that'll pop up on screen saying this weekend at the VFW Hall or the Civic Center or wherever. And you had to rely on what you were saying.
National Guard armories usually back then.
The National Guard,
the bigger buildings. VFW, the small National Guard armories were bigger in hockey arenas in Michigan.
Yeah, we were talking before we recorded. You mentioned a lot of hockey arenas that you would work in.
You can't throw a stone in Michigan without hitting a hockey arena.
Yeah,
and they would get in there. Must have been decent rent to get them, but they were nice big buildings, and they'd get nice big crowds.
But I mean, at the end of the day, it might be decent rent to get there. But if you're drawing like you're saying that you're drawing, then the gate is covered.
I got the receipts. I can prove what I'm saying.
Oh, I know. We're going to get some photos of some of the material you got here to put on the Patreon, because it's fascinating, some of the stuff that you are showing me. It's just it does feel like a different world. It feels,
because it is.
It feels mythical almost.
Even the stuff here is 24 years old. Some of this is 24 to 26 years old. That's a college graduate.
Yeah.
That's a grad school graduate.
And that's nuts to think about, because at the same time, that's a very long time, but
I'm still
really
young.
isn't.
How'd that happen?
Hey, you got the secret. You got the secret to the fountain of youth, Harker, and I want to figure out exactly where to get that exact hair dye. I'm going bald, though, is my issue. That's why I wear the hats.
Well, you could tattoo your hairline on the way you've tattooed your arms up.
Yeah, the last time you saw me, I didn't have the tattoos. I was still a very mild
mannered skin infection.
No, not quite.
Then I realized
yet.
it's Pokemon or some stuff.
Yeah, Pokemon. Yeah, this was my first tattoo, a full arm sleeve. Took about 2.5 years, but
Congratulations. You now look like everybody else.
I know, right? Like I'm not as unique, I guess. But
I was going to put a tattoo of a butt on my butt. But then I realized that Butthead did that.
Oh, yeah. And I remember that. I want to get a tattoo of a butt on my butt. I do remember that.
Yeah.
Beavis and Butthead is one of the most underrated things of all time. I love Beavis and Butthead so much.
You got to watch the new ones, though.
I've not seen the new ones. I've only seen a couple. The only one I've seen is where they do the escape room, but they're in the bathroom. That's the only one I've seen.
When you came over, I missed the opportunity. I was going to let you into my house and say, and hopefully somebody of the 16 people listening or however many know this reference or I'm wasting my time. I was going to say, hello and welcome to my apartment. Hello, well, thank you for having us.
I don't get that reference, but here we go.
How about Brian? Let me let you in the inside. Jason V.
Brian, what's this guy doing?
Jason V. Have you heard that before? Do you know that reference? I only sent you the clip. Oh, yeah.
Jason V is our peanut gallery here for this, by the way. I lost track of where we even were.
It doesn't matter. Let's get to the funny stuff. Let's do name drops. I want to drop names.
You want to do more name drops?
Let's do name drops. Nobody knows who I am. Let's talk about people they know.
I got a name for you, and this is one that I have wanted to get into. This is one of the names I knew I was going to bring up from the very beginning. You know, he is a legitimate legend. You know, that word gets thrown around way too much. May he rest in peace. He's the best. Let's talk about Iron Sheik, because I know you got some Sheiky baby stories.
Sheiky. 2000. We figured out what year that was? November of 04 or 03. He was my manager one night. But it was the only time I ever met him. But it was a memory that will live with me.
Really?
Forever.
The way you talked about it, you had worked a lot of shows with him. It seemed like it to me.
It felt like forever.
And that was just him coming to the ring, I'm sure.
It took him forever. No, it was in November 2003. It was Powerhouse Wrestling. Tim Lyle, my dear friend who passed away on September 11th of last year. God rest his soul. He had a show in Streeter, Illinois, where he used to run routinely. And this is one of those buildings. He ran the high school, and he used to draw 1,000 people every time.
That just seems like such an unattainable thing now.
A little bit to where he was getting 600, 700, and he wanted to boost the territory, so to speak. And he said he was going to bring in Iron Sheik and the Road Warriors.
Wow.
And I think that was a pretty good way to do it. So he got the attendance back up to 1,000. But as I say, I'm always early to shows, and Sheik was early to the show too. So I got the full show.
Wow.
He was in full Sheik mode from moment one. Apparently he'd had a bust up at the airport. He managed to get marijuana. This was post 9/11 world. And he managed to get marijuana on the plane through the airport into the building by wrapping it up in a gift package. Like a Christmas present. This was November. He wrapped it up like a Christmas present. And when the woman at the gate says, I need to check that package to see what's in it. Well, you can't have that through here like that. He says, don't you tell me that. He's telling the person that was with him tells the whole story. Sheik's right there. He agrees. Yep, that's what it is. Don't tell me that. That is a gift that has to get to my friends. Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors. Do you want me to tell Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors, did some jabroni bitch at the airport O'Hare tell them they can't have their present? I don't think that you do. And he's making a scene, and his voice builds and builds and builds. And there's a line behind him, and she says, sir, go through. Take your package.
Because he probably knew that it's like, if I cause enough of a scene, they're just going to let me through.
I think it was a tried and true practice by that point in his life.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm saying is that it's like, do you think that like he knew that if I make a scene, or that's just him?
I think that it's just him, and people didn't want to deal with his bull crap.
Yeah, they made that documentary about him like in 2014, I believe, maybe more.
They had an A&E one that I just saw recently.
Yeah, they did a WWE Legends about him, but they did that one, and they he's
all the Megan twins documentary.
Yes. That and like I remember like you telling me about. And this is before it had come out that he was working with those guys. When he started his Twitter account, you and I would always just cut up over his Twitter account.
That wasn't him doing that. He's illiterate.
And you called that. You smartened me up to that. You said that's not him running that. No. And I was like, how do you know? And he said because he's illiterate. But so what else from that? So we have the airport. What then goes on?
It was a full show. I mean, just, if you name it, we didn't, and this is before the shoot interviews, so I didn't know what to expect from him.
So this is before the infamous fucking bullshit.
That came after that. The Dan Marotti interview came after that. All of it, the Howard Stern, all of it was on the tail end of all
him
this.
pissing himself on Opie and Anthony and all
whatever
that.
he did. Yeah, but that was him in the locker room. He was all of that. Didn't pee on himself. I didn't know about that, but he did that. But they're cussing. And now the Road Warriors were supposed to be on that show, but Hawk made it, but Animal was in Japan and stuck. So they had Jerry Saggs come in and take Animal's place.
Wow.
The fans weren't disappointed because Hawk came out and did a promo where he says, hey, this is a history in the making. You're going to see the first time a Road Warrior teams with a Nasty Boy.
Yeah, that's actually pretty solid.
So they did that. But now Iron Sheik apparently didn't like Brian Knobbs. So Jerry Saggs called Knobbs on the phone and handed it to Sheik. And he said, say, Knobbs, it's Sheik. He says, huh? He says, Sheik, it's Knobbs. And he takes the phone. And Knobbs must start cutting a promo on Sheik. I can't hear that end of it, but Sheik's face drops and he goes, Knob, you son of a bitch, motherfucker. Sorry. I apologize for the language.
It's fine.
He said it. And he goes to throw the phone. And Saggs intercepts the phone just in time before it gets crushed.
Now, that's got to do with his heat with Hulk Hogan, I would assume, because I know...
No clue. I think everybody... I don't know this. I never was around these guys, but I think everybody has a little problem with Knobbs because he's a very gregarious personality.
Okay.
So they probably were like oil and water.
I could see that.
Hawk was there listening too, and Hawk turns to me. I'll never forget it. He goes, if you didn't know Sheiky, you'll know Sheiky by the end of the night.
That's incredible.
And I'm trying to, like I said, I'm used to being around these so-called names or legends, but come on, it's Road Warrior Hawk. And I'm trying not to geek out, but I'm like, Road Warrior Hawk just shared something with me,
And like that's what's so crazy about this is that like the way that you're just casually mentioning it, because like you said, you're not trying to geek out. Like I remember being in a locker room with Rhyno and sitting and talking politics with him.
Rhyno, I worked with Rhyno once. Power slammed me damn near through the mat.
Really?
Yeah, it's a strong dude.
Yeah, he's a very intelligent guy too. We sat back in a locker room with him.
You don't believe him? Ask him.
Yeah. He just started talking politics with us, and like I'm just like I could not tell you a single word that he said because again I'm just like yeah, this is cool. Yeah,
see, that's somebody I would have come up on the Independence with, and that's somebody you're freaking out for meeting because he's a legend by that point.
Yeah, at that point,
I worked on multiple shows in Michigan with Rhyno.
Yeah, and he
was just a regular face.
Yeah.
First time I met him, it was me and my brother who wrestled at the time too.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I have a twin brother.
I did know that, but I didn't know that he wrestled.
We wrestled. It was me and my brother against Rhyno and Christian Cage.
Wow. Oh my God. Christian Cage.
And that was in Detroit in that show where I was showing you about, there's a flyer he's got and he'll show you that that's right before Edge got signed. Edge used to work regular for that promotion.
Yeah. So tell us. So let's more of this material, like because again, we will have photos of it on the Patreon. We'll put it on the free tier. There's a letter that was written to you by someone that you trained with that to me is one of the most bonkers things I've ever seen with the ability of hindsight. It's crazy to me.
A handwritten letter. We used to actually send each other correspondence through the U.S. mail. And if you can believe that, no email, correspondence through the U.S. mail. And he wrote a handwritten letter about where he was working and the promoters I should contact.
Yeah.
And at the bottom, he says, I was just at such and such promotion, and I met this guy named Sexton Hardcastle, who says he's getting ready to go to the WWF because he went and Bret Hart saw him and Bret Hart liked him and suggested him. And as Sexton Hardcastle turned out to be Edge.
He's a Hall of Famer now.
And now he's had a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah.
And this is just, of course, I just happened to keep this letter. I don't even know why I had it. I found it in a pile of stuff. Probably for the phone numbers that were on it. And I'll be darned. Now he's had a whole, and Rhyno, and this was all the same crew.
Yeah.
Christian Cage.
Which, I mean,
Joe Legend.
Yeah. And that's the thing about, like, Edge truly is one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. Like, he's just so good. So then
And I just missed him because I started working for the promotion after he got signed.
So that answered my question.
Never met him.
You never got to, like, share a locker room with him?
Never met him.
Wow. But you did Christian Cage, obviously, because you said that you worked him, and Rhyno, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, I feel like a lot of your story is in Michigan. Like, a lot of stuff happened in that state for you.
Yeah. I started in Florida, wrestled in the South, moved back to Illinois where my dad was because the money wasn't there and I needed to live with my dad and work from Illinois. But then my friend that we're talking about that I trained with, he's a Detroit guy. So he went home and lived in Detroit, and there was a hot scene up around there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So eventually I started working more in Michigan, and then ended up meeting who would become my wife up there. So I moved to Michigan.
I did not know that.
That became my home base.
Wow, that is like, because like I said, like every story that you've mentioned a lot of Michigan, so like it very clearly is like very pivotal into your story. And what's crazy for me about it is that, like, you mentioned Joey Legend. Like, I've read Edge's book. I actually did a book report on his book in like 7th grade, and he is mentioned. That was in 2005, probably, when I was in 7th grade. And, he's mentioned a lot in Edge's book, and he talks about that Detroit territory, for lack of a better term, a lot in his book. And
Malcolm Monroe Jr. or Malcolm Monroe Sr. was the one running it at the time.
Now I want to I still have the book. I want to thumb back through and see if he mentions him by name.
He's got to.
Yeah, he would have to. But like, he also talks about like those Canadian death tours and all the stuff like that. Did you ever do anything like remotely close to that?
I just hopped over the border into Toronto. I never did that Canada thing. I've heard about it enough.
Yeah, just the other day, there was a YouTube video about it. And I didn't watch it, but it was like it was like a 45-minute video, and I love stuff like that. So I was just like, I'm going to remember that. But yeah, I mean, that's just, again, what is just so baffling is just the casual mention of just like, yeah, I wrestled Christian Cage. It's just like, it reminds me of whenever we had Oliver Kane on, he was just casually talking about John Moxley. And it's just like, again, just the casual nature of it just being mentioned is just insane to me. I cannot believe it.
It's casual.
But we got Harker here. He's thumbing through
I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm magazine right now.
I'm looking for a new topic.
Is that so? Like I said, you've got this this stack of stuff here, and you've got flyers and you've got magazines, and so one of them is Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and you are actually listed in the PWI 500. You said you made it a couple of times.
A couple times late in my career. I'd already been wrestling 16 years by that point. By the time I made it. That was so political, it was ridiculous because those magazines were based in New York. So if you were East Coast, you were pretty much in. And then the Midwest guys, they just throw in toward the end.
I mean, I feel like ranking 500 people.
It's impossible.
At a certain point, you're just throwing shit at the wall.
Somebody's name in there. It was a publicity stunt mostly to do 500 originally. But then it was just nice to get your name in there. And it was even nicer if they put your picture. But what year did you say you did your book report?
I want to say 07, probably.
07?
Oh, no, sorry. 06, probably.
This is a catalog, and I'm showing him a Stagecoach Wrestling Boots catalog from 2005. That's when I first got this catalog so that I could order boots and start doing the Harker Dirge gimmick.
Yeah.
So by the time you were doing book reports on Edge, I was already sick of what I was doing and switching it up.
So that's a good way to, because that's one thing that we love to talk about on here is character work. And, naturally you talked about, your bleach blonde Matt Maverick, and you make the transition.
Tell them about my YouTube channel. They can go look at all that on there. Get the visual references.
Yeah. We had mentioned it one time that you made this documentary. Now, correct me. I misremember the name. It was called How Did I Get Here? I believe is what you called it. I think that's what you called it.
What am I doing in New Jersey? That was a George Carlin HBO special.
But yeah, for anyone that wants visuals, we'll definitely put a link to this on our Facebook page. Like you made a little documentary, like explaining all of this, like how you started out and how, like,
just from that gimmick mostly. I think what did I have? I had the training and that, and then I arrived at the second gimmick.
It's been a bit since I've seen it, but yeah, I know
me too.
I know one thing that you talked about that I actually meant to bring up, and it just sparked in my head, is that one thing that you said in that little documentary that you made. I shouldn't call it little. That sounds like I'm saying it's bad.
It's only like 15 minutes
It's
long.
like a 15, 20-minute documentary. But you had made the comment whenever you had first made the transition into being a heel. You said that you felt like that you were like, you didn't really have it in you. So then you thought, well, why don't I just do what I know I would hate? And
did I say that?
Yeah, you did. And that was something... That was actually, I can bring up the tape. That was actually something that you said. And like, it was so funny that you say that, because when I was doing heel, that's how I would do it. I would be like, what would annoy me? Like, so did you find that transition rough, or like, was it simple?
No, heel was the easiest thing as I've ever done in my life.
Everyone says that. Everyone says that.
Because people naturally want to hate.
Yep.
Everybody's a hater. It's easier to hate than love.
Yeah. It's almost
hardwired. We're just weak in the flesh.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to hate because it makes it, if they can find fault or flaw in you, well, doesn't that automatically make them better?
Yeah.
That's why people tear each other down, to feel better about themselves. That's weakness. So all you do is prey upon somebody else's weakness by pretending to be somebody that they would be intimidated by. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. And I think that it almost ties into the insecurities of people as well, because it's like, you look at this big buff wrestler who's telling you that, oh, I could have, let's just use the Rick Rude example. It's like, take any woman, they believe that, and he could take their wife if he wanted to, and there's something to be said about that, of where it's like, it ties into like, and we're not going to get like, too Freudian about it, but I mean, it's like, it's all psychology. It's all human nature.
You just said it in one.
Yeah.
Psychology.
That's all it is. That's all it is.
It's not a secret. It's just, if you were taught that way and trained that way, you already knew it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's some of the things that I learned from day one from Adrian. Psychology.
Yeah.
Why do people hate you? Why do they love you? Why do they want to cheer for you? What do you do in the match? Why? When? And nobody passed that on to so many.
Yeah.
Now they're swimming upstream.
Yeah. So then with, that being said, you become this heel, and then it was, just kind of, would you say that you felt like almost like it was just, now for the time, probably not, but now like kind of generic, for lack of a better term? Like, did you feel like that you wanted to express yourself in more of a different way? So that's why you went with the Harker Dirge character?
No.
Or
I switched characters because wrestling was starting to get kind of bad, and I just wanted to have fun.
Oh, okay.
That's when we were talking about the blink of an eye moment.
Yeah.
So by 2005, like 10 years in, it's already started. Crowds are starting to drop. I'm not digging what I'm seeing out there. So I'm like, I'm just going to have fun. I always wanted to try a character. So
yeah.
Be a character.
So then this is a question that I have always wanted to ask you, and I've never really, what was the basis for the Harker Dirge character? Like, what was the influence?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay.
My wife was watching it all the time, and they had a character called Spike, and he was British, but I wasn't going to do a British accent. But I thought I wanted to do something similar to that and translate it to wrestling. And I tried it at first. It was kind of a more quiet character, but I'm not a quiet person when I perform.
Mm-hmm.
So I added I amped it up about 100 times volume.
Yeah. And when you started it, Harker was a heel, right? Or was
it was always, I never would have done dark. It was a dark gimmick. It was darkness. It was evil. And I don't think evil is cool or good or fine or decent. And I don't think people should cheer for it. So I wanted to be a heel 100%. You know, if you're going to have a dragon slayer, which is the hero, you got to have the biggest, baddest dragon out there, right?
Yeah.
I was going to be the biggest, baddest dragon. Problem was, we had a lack of dragon slayers out there. We didn't have Prince Valiant running around anymore. We had Prince Geek, and people started cheering the heel.
Yeah. Now you were wrestling during this time, whenever the Attitude Era and all that, and it became cool to start liking the heel. Was that rough for you?
No, I never had. When I was doing the Matt Maverick gimmick and as a heel, nobody ever liked me.
Okay.
But I remember it was difficult in the Attitude Era because it was when they had Suck It.
Yeah.
DX had Suck It. And you'd go out there as a heel and you'd have 8-year-old kids crotch chopping and saying, suck it. And it was disgusting. And I'd look at them and I'd say, you don't even know what it is, or at least I hope you don't. And then I'd look at their parents and I'd say, you ought to be really proud of yourself. And then what would be worse is they'd be laughing saying, yeah, we are.
But
I said, now you see, that's why I come out here and try to grace you people with my presence and give you a little bit of classy entertainment for an evening. And you're over here replicating the deviants and the peons that you see on the WWF programming, telling me to suck it when you don't even know what it is.
Yeah. And it goes back into the psychology of it. Like, you're getting deep into their minds, and you're going after their insecurities. Like, the one thing that
they should have told me to suck it either.
They shouldn't have. I do agree with you on that one. But
children,
like, as parents, the one thing that most parents don't want to hear is that you're a bad parent. They raised the parent.
They were bad parents.
Yeah, and that's what
you know what
doing.
They were. They were letting their kids watch WWF during the Attitude Era.
Yeah, yeah. So there is one legend that I have always, I guess legend is a good way to
Larry Zbyszko?
put it. Yeah, the living legend.
I worked with him too.
Oh, there's a good name drop. That's one I didn't expect.
Larry was Larry was the manager against me.
Oh, okay.
It was a tag. It was me and somebody against a tag team that had Larry as their manager. And how did Larry Zbyszko become their manager? Because Captain Lou Albano no-showed.
It's always the weirdest no-shows.
Because his mom died again.
Again? that took me a second, but Larry Zbyszko is not a reference that I was expecting today. But
he was a wonderful man to share a locker room with. Very talkative, tells stories, very entertaining and engaging. Wonderful man.
Yeah. So
what other legends you got in mind? Joe Legend?
Joey
Legend, Bruno Sammartino?
He just so happened to be in my book.
The Legend
book
of
report
Cooter
on
Vance.
Edge. Yes. No, I had always heard this legend. I had always heard this legend. I'm not trying to laugh at this because it's a genuine question. I had heard a story that the movie The Wrestler, you were originally supposed to be in that movie as the alternative guy that Randy the Ram wrestles in the very beginning.
No. Sabu was supposed to be Ernest Miller's spot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Sabu was going to be Ernest Miller's spot to play the Sheik, but they wanted him to gain weight. And he didn't want to gain weight because then he thought, because he was still wrestling full time. And people would think that he had just got lazy or got fat. So Sabu gave the script to his cousin Eddie Farhat Jr., who's the son of the original Sheik, Ed Farhat. And Eddie started telling people he was going to have that role in the movie, and he wanted to use us as extras. So Eddie was blowing smoke up our butts.
Oh, okay.
That's that story.
Okay. I don't know where I had originally heard that story, but I had heard that you were in consideration to be in that role. Because, I mean, the Harker Dirge character was very similar to what that guy was that Randy, he had granted, he didn't have the big mohawk or whatever, but it was.
But Adrian Street made all of the gear in that movie.
I did not know that.
Absolutely. And if you look in the beginning of the movie, there's a scroll by during the credits, during the original song in the credits, and they're showing magazine clippings, and you can see Adrian's original Pro Wrestling Illustrated ad, "Want to be a wrestler," and it has $signs on it, and it has his number and his ad and everything.
Wow.
That was a nod to Adrian, who made Mickey Rourke's outfits. He made all the wrestling outfits in that movie.
Yeah, that I did not know that.
Yeah, and then from that he got an in with Hollywood, and he started making outfits for other movies. And I don't remember what else it was, but he made some kind of flashy robe for one of those. What's the dude that does Medea? The man that pretends to be a woman. Medea.
Medea, yeah.
He made some kind of flashy robe for a Medea movie or something like that.
Man, the more that we're having this conversation, the more and more my respect towards Adrian Street is just growing and growing. That man really did do it all.
Well, that's what we're here for, to put Adrian over.
Yeah.
Hey, we're supposed to be talking about me.
You said you didn't want to talk about you too much anymore, because then you would get bored. But so yeah, like there was another rumor that I had heard, and let's see. I had heard these are $5
foot long. They used to sell it. That used to be the cost of a sandwich at Subway.
Oh my God, I went to Subway not too long ago. It was $18 for my meal.
And that was just Sun Chips.
And that was just the Sun Chips, yeah. No, I had heard.
Do you know ducks eat free at Subway? I've got a book about anti-gravity. I can't put it down.
Was that a Mitch Hedberg? That's another thing you and I bonded over, was our love of Mitch Hedberg. Like, we love Mitch Hedberg.
I used to like his comedy. I still do, but I used to too.
Oh, I used to too. Oh, you beat me to it. But no, I had heard were you originally considered to play the Kevin Thorne character?
Not the Kevin Thorne character. WWE was going to go on Sci-Fi Network, and I heard through insiders they wanted to have gimmicks, that would match Sci-Fi. Sci-Fi at the time had a lot of horror, type shows, and obviously science fiction. But so I sent all my material in, and I had a initial call back with Mark Carano, and then I never heard back. And then the next thing they say, we're having a vampire character on, and it's Kevin Thorne.
Yeah, because Harker Dirge was originally a vampire. Like you said, it was based off of Buffy. Did Sabu have any help with that? Because he was there at that time. So
no, I hadn't worked with Sabu at that point yet.
Oh, okay.
See, we're all over the time frame here.
I know. I sincerely apologize.
Need a calendar with pinpoints on it, but Sabu was much later.
Oh, I did not know that.
That was after what? I don't even know what years those were.
So ECW.
I ended up tag teaming with Kevin Thorne a couple times. I quite like him. I really do. I enjoy him. He's a very nice guy.
He seems like a really good guy. Yeah. So you got to forgive me on that one, because I assumed that this was pre WWE ECW as they call it. But from the sound of it, it was definitely after. So
yeah, I think I wrestled with Sabu in 2007.
That makes sense, because that's about the time that WWE ECW shut down, which was that he was released, rather, because I think Sandman was released in like 2007. Sabu, that was when they just gave up on trying to make it a copy of ECW, and they just did
might as well have given up completely.
Yeah. So do you feel that the influence came from the fact that you were sending in that material?
I don't have a clue. If it did, bless them. I'm glad they ran with it, and Kevin Thorne made something of it, but it didn't last long.
No.
But I was on. I kind of remember that time frame because I was on a show in Detroit, with Sabu. I think it was his last show he was on before going to WWE.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at a concert hall. It was a Lucha Libre show at a concert hall. And it was another couple thousand crowd. And that was one of my... Let's do more name drops.
Let's do more name drops.
So this one was... they called it Revolucha. And it was Sabu's last match before going into WWE. And he... wrestled in a tag match against two locals, and his partner was Mil Mascaras.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who were the two locals? Did the two locals become someone, or were they just locals?
It was Nate Matson, who's a good wrestler up there, and Conrad Kennedy III. He ended up having a dark side gimmick too, and I don't remember what he ended up being, but that was the big match. This was a Revolucha in Detroit. It was music theater with several thousand people, and they had multiple dressing rooms and things. This is one of my marquee moments in wrestling. I just want to crowbar this in here because
Please.
I love lucha libre.
Really?
I love lucha libre. I never could imitate the style or anything like that, but one of the first wrestlers that I worked with on a regular basis, one of the first veterans I worked with was a luchador named El Tejano. He's not the known El Tejano in Mexico now, but he was Joe Ortega is his name. And his brother wrestled for Southwest, the Blanchard's territory, as Relampago Leon. And Relampago Leon had a feud in Southwest against Adrian Street.
So it all ties in.
So now I'm having a feud up in the north with El Tejano. And I learned a lot through him. And that's how I became a big fan of Lucha Libre. And then I ended up seeing it on satellite and watching it on a regular basis. But so super fan of Mil Mascaras, super fan of all of the luchadors. And here I'm on a lucha show with Mil Mascaras. But Mil is a diva.
I've heard
So he has his private locker room. Nobody gets to see Mil Mascaras. In fact, the promoter told me as he was coming to the show, one of the promoters, it was co-promotion, he said, man, I was driving up to the building and I see Mil Mascaras in a warm-up suit and his mask walking across the street from one hotel to the other. I said, Mil, I'm such and such. What are you doing? He goes, I'm going to the gym over here. They have a better gym in this hotel than the one you put me in. He says, well, okay, can you get into that gym? I can go anywhere I want. I'm Mil Mascaras.
And where is this again?
It's in Detroit.
It's in Detroit?
Well, in the nice part. It's a suburb. I can't remember what the name of the suburb was. But sure enough, he got in with his mask and everything. Nobody asked him a question.
Wow, that was going to be my question.
He had that Iron Sheik energy. But I'm still building.
Okay.
Wait, there's more.
Ooh.
So Mil Mascaras is a diva. He's got his own private locker room. But I know that the scene is this. Sabu's going to wrestle a one-on-one match with Nate Matson. The other guy's going to do a run out. Sabu's going to need a superhero to come save him. I know that's going to be Mil Mascaras. So I come out down the ramp through. There's a big, huge curtain and an entryway. I stand next to that entryway because I know Mil's going to have to be there. I just wanted to stand next to him. Just stand next to the legend. Here he comes with his mask and his long cape. He's got the gold mask, red tights, gold over tights. He's got the blue gold cape on. And there he is, Mil Mascaras. I go and I just stand shoulder to shoulder. And then if you've ever seen Mil Mascaras, he kind of wrestles up on his tiptoes with his stomach sucked in. And I'm looking, I start to hear, I look over, he's inflating himself. He's sucking in air, letting it out, sucking it in. The chest gets bigger, lets it out. The stomach comes in farther, sucks it in more. He's a little taller, stomach's a little, then he does his run out.
So he's got to do that little warm up before he.
So thanks to me butting myself into the situation, I got to stand there next to Mil Mascaras' inflatable man warm up ritual.
I've never heard of anything like that.
I don't know how many people have ever seen it before, but I saw it and it was worth it. Also on that card, Ultimo Dragon wrestled Chris Daniels as Curry Man.
Oh my God! I bet that was incredible.
Tremendous. That's the first match I ever found a seat at ringside and sat in and hid and watched in person. And then after them, Dr. Wagner Jr., my favorite luchador, and Silver King, who wrestled.
We were just talking about Silver King.
God rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago.
I did not know that.
He wrestled as Black Tiger because he was the Black Tiger after Eddie Guerrero in Japan.
I did not know that either.
So Dr. Wagner Jr. versus Black Tiger. And this was after he'd been in the Jack Black movie, Nacho Libre. He was the Oro, or what was the gold character in that?
Oh, it's been so long.
But he was that character in that. And Rey Mysterio Sr.
Oh, so Senior was still alive at that point.
Senior's still alive.
He's still alive?
Yeah.
You could have told me that he would have died 15 years.
They say he's Rey Mysterio's uncle, but he's not. He was the originator of the gimmick, and he handed it down to Rey.
So he's not even related to Rey Mysterio?
If I remember correctly, not by blood.
Oh, wow. That I did not know.
They had a triangular, a three-way match.
Oh. You just described like an incredible card, by the way.
It was
That's a stacked card.
Stacked.
Yeah.
That's what I'll show him. He'll show you.
Yes.
That's what that's from.
Oh, this picture here that's on this cover here?
That's it set up and everything. I'm showing him a picture on the cover of a Independent Wrestling Magazine, and it's got me in front of this stage.
Oh yeah, I see Lucha in the
Revolucha.
background there. Revolucha. Yeah, I've already forgot what you said it was. Yeah, but
Yeah, that was one of my favorite cards to be on.
just the fact that Ultimo Dragon versus Curry Man.
Ultimo Dragon versus Curry. I think you could find that on YouTube now.
I'm going to look for that. That sounds like something I want to see. And you said
Somebody
this
had
is-
it up at one point, but that was Sabu's last match on the
So this
Independents.
is 06 then I'm assuming.
It's got to be something.
Yeah,
like that.
because I think ECW relaunched in around this time of year in 06.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I
Wow.
had some cool experiences.
Yeah, like you're just like it's almost like, when we had Oliver on, we called him the Forrest Gump of pro wrestling because he's just casually mentioning the stuff. He's like,
All right, let's do it. I'm gonna top Oliver for name recognitions. How many we're gonna do? Let's just drop them.
okay, who's the biggest name that you can drop on me right now?
I took the splash from Jimmy Superfly Snuka.
Oh my God.
That's the splash is on my YouTube channel. The match isn't. Snuka's a pretty big name. He was in a cartoon series.
Yeah.
First guy to jump off the cage. Tag team partners with King Kong Bundy.
Yeah, you have Bundy
He
stories.
was on Married with Children.
Yeah,
He's on Moving with Richard Pryor.
You have a lot of Bundy stories, right? Like, didn't you work a lot of shows with him, or am I
I've done
making
a
that
lot of
up?
the shows with Bundy.
Yeah,
He was a funny guy.
mm-hmm.
I really liked him.
Yeah.
We could go on.
I mean, if you want to try to top Oliver's
Dan the
name
Beast
drops,
Severn. I wrestled Dan the Beast Severn. The
wow.
UFC champion.
So he was UFC champion when he wrestled you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
He had been UFC champion and NWA champion.
So when you when you're working him, is he like trying to be like super protective of his? Because he's
No, Dan's
he's-
as laid back as you can be.
he's UFC champion. So I mean, he's
but
got
he's not insecure. He knows that it's professional wrestling,
That's a incredible point. A lot of it is like the insecurity.
and you've got to get your time in.
Yeah.
So we had a fun match. He was not stiff, but Rick Steiner was. Rick Steiner hits like he's got a brick in his hand.
Oh my God.
The clotheslines weren't too bad once you jumped into
Steiner line, brother. So I know that you said that you were like you had mentioned, you were on there with Hawk, when that one was kind of like you're not trying to geek out or anything. So you said that you really don't have a lot of those moments, but I mean, it may be Hawk, but like, what's one that you look at and you're just like, oh my God, I'm about to be in the ring with.
I never had that far as I was going to be in a ring with. The only one that I mentioned that I crowbarred in was Mil Mascaras because he's like Hulk Hogan level of a legend.
He's essentially, yeah.
But I didn't get to wrestle in the ring with him, but just to be in his same company was exciting for me. But I just wanted that moment. But I never got excited or nervous or any of that to wrestle guys in a ring. Some people will. They'll get nervous and they'll screw the match up because they think, oh, this guy's so important or he's a name or he's a legend. For me, I knew it was going to be an easy night. I didn't have to worry for a change. I didn't have to lead the match.
Because you knew they were going to lead it.
I knew it was going to be easy. They knew how to work. They weren't going to hurt me. I wasn't going to hurt them. As soon as we tied up, they knew I wasn't going to hurt them. It was going to be a good night.
Yeah, and I'm sure that your reputation started to precede yourself too, because they'd be like, "Oh, I'm working this Harker Dirge. Oh, I worked him."
One of the best compliments I ever had, really, if I think about it now, I'm just shooting off the top of my head, was when I wrestled Cowboy Bob Orton one-on-one for the first time. And we just called it in the ring, just like you would. Before match, he says, I got to tell you, I can't bump. I said, that's just fine, Bob. Don't need you to bump. He could make it to the mat, but he couldn't take a big bump. And we did our thing. I was the heel. He was the baby face, and we worked it. And boom, 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 boom. After the match, he shakes my hand. He goes, that was fun. Fun?
Wow.
With Cowboy Bob Orton?
He main evented WrestleMania.
He and Snuka.
Yeah.
Were in the corners. I've been with them both.
Oh, wow. Didn't even make that connection.
Before that, Bob had been the referee in one of my matches in a totally different area of the country. And then here I'm working him one-on-one. And then years later, he was my tag team partner.
Yeah,
So
I was on that show.
By the time he was my partner, he really definitely remembered me because the moment we worked one-on-one, his son Nathan was in his corner. And that was a big deal to have his youngest son with him and all that. And Nathan kicked me in the head with a dress shoe on.
Oof.
Knotted me up. It wasn't Nathan's fault. It's just the dress shoe. But after that moment, Nathan decided he didn't want much more to do with wrestling, and that was his one and only. But he got into stand-up comedy which you know a thing or two about trying.
Yeah.
And Nathan was really funny, and he just recently inducted his dad into the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame. Randy was with him.
Yeah, that made a lot of news
and
that he showed up.
Nathan's induction, his humor was spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan's about 5'11", and Randy was there, and Randy stood next to him. Randy's what, 6'4"?
Randy's very big,
and huge. And one of Nathan's jokes was, you could tell by the time I came around, Dad's sperm was less potent.
Randy Orton's kind of funny too. There's been some stuff that he's like, there's a video that was recently going around of where he's coming to the ring and the ring announcer says, coming to the ring, weighing in at 275 pounds. And he goes, 200, I'm like 290. I've been eating. It's just, and then like you look at his stuff that he was doing with, Matt Riddle and whatnot was kind of funny, but I did not know that he had a younger brother that did stand-up comedy. That's insane.
Some of his stuff's online. I think he's got some of his older stuff. It was a little awkward, but it sounds, based on that Hall of Fame induction, sounds like he's got his routine down pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't actually watch that. I did seen the pictures because the internet blew up of like, oh my God, Randy Orton just showed up at an indie show and to induct his dad into the Hall of Fame.
Nathan said, I knew wrestling wasn't fake the first time my dad gave me a spanking. I couldn't sit down. All the chairs were broken. Thank you for the sympathy laugh. He delivered it much better than I did.
That's a good one. That's actually a really good one. No, like, that's the funny thing about it is, again, I keep harping back on this is just it's like, yeah, I wrestled with Bob Orton because it's like you mentioned when you teamed with Bob Orton. I was on that show and I was just walking. I'm like, oh my God, that's Bob Orton. Like that's Cowboy Bob Orton.
Jason V saw his penis.
Yeah, I've heard that story.
I said, that's where Randy came from.
I do remember that one actually. But that's the thing is that it's like I walk in and I'm like, that's Cowboy Bob Orton. But meanwhile, like you said, he was just an old road buddy. You had already worked with him a few times.
Somebody I was familiar with.
Casual. You would, he knew you and, but that's what's so funny about it is that I walk in, I'm like, oh my God, that's Bob Orton. And then you're like, already. And he's still working to this day. Like that's what's nuts is that I'll see pictures of him on shows like upwards
he's
of
72 years old.
Yeah, he's still working. He's still working. He recently, WrestleMania weekend, had a match against Kyle Pfeiffer. I don't remember which company it was, but that match did happen. I swear to you that match happened. I
bet you I know one thing that didn't happen that night.
What's that?
When they went back to the locker room, Bob Orton did not say, oh, that was fun.
Boy, what an interview there. What an
Great,
interview.
dude.
Here's the thing too, guys. Breaking news. This is just part one.
Part one?
This is just part one. We got a solid 3 hours of content with Harker Dirge on this podcast. And next week, we are, of course, going to be uploading part 2 of my sit-down interview with Harker Dirge. If you want to hear more about the interview and like what went into the day and all of that, of course, we're going to be rolling into a paid show for our Patreon supporters where you can hear a little bit behind the scenes of, what led into the interview, how the interview went, the on the day notes, and whatnot. So yeah, man, I just, even though I had recorded it a few days ago, now doing this, I'm just sitting here. I'm all giddy again. I'm just
I can see it in your face.
I can't believe I did it. I can't believe I did it. But thank you, Harker. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much. That second part of that interview, Harker touched on a lot of stuff in this first part. The advent of the internet in wrestling, talking about getting trained with Adrian Street, just everything in between. The names that he dropped. I mean, it's like, my God, just him casually bringing up, I'm standing next to Road Warrior Hawk, and he looks at me and says, if you don't know Sheiky, baby, you're about to.
This was like a Marvel movie of a podcast with all the cameos.
It was. But there's even more of that in the second part. I'm telling you, you guys are going to really enjoy this second part. That's going to be coming next week, our normal release schedule, of course. You're going to be able to catch it early on Patreon, as always. So yeah, really look forward to that one. You can find Michael Madrox on Instagram at the word 1 and then the numbers 900 909 9900. You can find me on Instagram at DW_mischievous rabbit. MadBashStudios.com is of course the big plug where you can find us all over the internet on there. And for Michael Madrox, I've been Dickie Wabash, and we will see you down the line on some form of content.